We can never have complete control. The idea of having complete control is nonsense, and it would actually be very ugly. You have to be subtle. You have to learn psychology. You have to learn certain aspects of how to move people without them realizing in certain directions, which is like the art of seduction. And if you're not interested in that, if you're just going to tell people what you think and what you're going to do, that means you're not interested in practical action. You're not interested in results. You're just interested in venting your own frustrations or your own anger.
When we hear the word power, I think a lot of people kind of brace themselves, like, here we go, someone's going to try and have power over me, this is about manipulation, and so on and so forth. I learned pretty early on that every career endeavor, there are power dynamics. There's mentor-mentee, there are teachers and their students, and both have power. In romantic relationships, there's a power exchange. There are yeses and there are no's, there are maybes. Maybe we could start very simply by just saying, how would you define power in terms of its functional definition, like in interpersonal relations? And then why do you think power is so essential to all relationships? That's really what I'd like to get to. Why is it so essential? Why couldn't it be something else?
The way I define power is I try and take it away from that kind of negative context that most people have and that you brought up. And I bring it to something very primitive and very primal. The way the human being is wired, the feeling that we have no control over our environment, over your career, over your children, over your parents, is deeply, deeply immiserating. And it compels us to act in certain ways, either attempts to find positive ways of power or doing what you call covert ways of getting power, traditionally passive-aggressive means. So it's deeply wired in us to want a degree of control over the immediate environment and immediate events. We can never have complete control, and the idea of having complete control is nonsense, and it would actually be very ugly, because you want a degree of letting go and letting circumstances come to you, etc., etc. You want to feel like, with other people and relationships, that you can influence them, that you can move them in a certain direction, either to get you to love you and treat you better, or either to stop annoying, irritating behaviors, or either to, wake up and do productive activities with your children, etc. You want to have the ability to influence people, to move them in a certain direction, either in your interest or in their interest, right? And once you have that need, and every single human being who's ever lived has that need, and we often don't recognize it because we're embarrassed by it. We're embarrassed by our desire for power, for our need to control. Every human being has it, right? And it's not easy because human beings are complicated. By being overt and telling them this is what you need to do, you create resentment, you create an enemy. People are tricky. They wear masks. They pretend to say one thing and they do another. They have their egos, and you inadvertently wound their egos or trip them in some way, and they react in a way that you don't expect. Power is this kind of invisible realm that envelops society, where people are continually battling each other and struggling in it, but no one is talking about it. No one's being overt about it. No one's saying, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. And so when you enter the social world and the career world, you're not expecting these battles. You don't know, no one's taught you, no one's trained you, your parents don't train you, nobody trains you. And you make mistakes, and you realize how political people are. If you're a Sharky character, there's a certain percentage of them who realize, wow, I can deceive people, I can manipulate them, I can get what I want, I can pretend to love them, and they'll fall for me, and I can do all this other stuff. But for most of us, the 95% of us who aren't sharks, and I'm including myself in that category, it's very, very disturbing to suddenly enter that world and see all of that invisible power games on this no one's given you any advice for or helped you. If you want to move people, if you want them to follow your ideas, if you want them to be more aligned with your politics or your ideas, you have to be subtle. You have to learn psychology. You have to learn certain aspects of how to almost move people without them realizing in certain directions, which is like the art of seduction. And if you're not interested in that, if you're just going to tell people what you think and what you're going to do, that means you're not interested in practical action. You're not interested in results. You're just interested in venting your own frustrations or your own anger. So learning the subtle little dynamics of power extremely essential because we're a social animal. It doesn't mean that you're going to get dirty, that you're going to suddenly go out there and manipulate the hell out of people. Most of the 48 laws of power is about defense, but how to defend yourself from the sharks about there, how to defend yourself from making classic mistakes, like outshining the master, like talking too much, like arguing with people instead of demonstrating your ideas, on and on and on. It's not an ugly thing. It actually makes you a better social individual.
As a young guy growing up, it was so important to me to know where I fit in with my friend group. And I didn't think of it so much as a hierarchy, nor when I was in my academic studies did I think of it as a hierarchy, even though it was, clearly was, right? So much as the goal was to figure out where was my unique slot that I could do the most good for myself and others.
Right.
You know, kind of finding my spot. Where should I be in order to express that and also feel connected to others? Based on your answer, I did have to figure out, who's trying to have power over, who's pretending that they don't want power but is actually exerting power. And there's an incredible peace that comes from knowing that one is in the correct place, both profession, interpersonally, in relation to oneself, but also in the context of one's peer group. It's kind of like, this is where I belong. Because trying to gain power when one is trying to move to a position that isn't right for them or in a way that isn't right for them just seems so energetically costly. Trying to gather resources simply to have them, to give the illusion of power, but then being afraid of losing them just sounds like a recipe for misery, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
Whereas figuring out where am I most powerful in the benevolent sense of the word, that seems like a good pursuit.
Well, it's connecting up to mastery again and finding your life's purpose. I'm not saying that it's a beautiful thing, but that's part of human nature, the desire to actually, prove yourself and find that niche that you belong to, so you don't have that kind of that sense of inferiority. So a lot of it is kind of compensating when you're a child for things that are your weaknesses and finding what you're so good at that you do have that power and people can't bully you. Power definitely is connected in some way to that inner sense of what you were meant to do, and you feel it with the ease and the connection that comes from it, right?